Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Jameson. I'm on the marketing team at Phrase, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Introduction to Phrase Strings webinar. Tonight, we're going to be going through everything you might want to know about phrase strings at kind of a high level and get into some of the nitty-gritty with our demo, which is presented by Alicia. Alicia is an enterprise solutions architect on our team. And yeah, Alicia has gone ahead and pre-recorded a demo for you that we're going to play, and then we're going to jump into questions live at the end. So I put the question kind of collector, the Slido link in the webinar chat, so you can access that there, and we'll answer those questions live. But Alicia, if you want to say hi before we start, I will go ahead and, well, you say hi. I'm going to pull up the recording.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Kate. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm excited that you've all joined today and taken the time to hear about phrase strings and what we have to offer as far as software development localization goes, string-based localization. So yeah, if you have any questions, pop them in Slido, and I look forward to speaking to you shortly.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to share this video, and we'll see you back here after the recording.
Okay, here I am on my phrase dashboard. Phrase strings is a part of the phrase suite. As you can see here, phrase TMS was formerly known as MemSource, as some of you may or may not be familiar. Phrase strings, however, was created by developers for developers, and it's made to elevate your string-based localization, also known as key-based localization. And it can act as the single source of truth for your multilingual software copy. So let me go ahead and log into strings. Right away, I'm presented with my spaces and projects list. So you can think of spaces here as a type of folder structure, and within your spaces contain your projects. So this is tile view. We also have list view. It's very easy to create a space. You can click on create new space here. To create a new project, simply click on new project up here, and I'll get into that in a moment. On project creation, that will be associated with a localization workflow. But first things first, I would like to go over some basic housekeeping items for phrase strings. So let's look at our menu items over here on the left. Let's start with users. So users is where you can actually add and invite new users to collaborate in your strings organization. Under the roles and permissions tab here, you can actually look at the permissions and access rights and levels that each of the user roles can be assigned. Okay, so I'm just scrolling down here so you can take a look. One thing to point out is if you're using phrase strings as a standalone platform and not part of the phrase suite, then you would invite linguist users, translators, to actually work on the translations directly in the strings editor. So you'll see what that looks like. Note that throughout today's webinar, you'll see these links to our Help Center documentation, which is very useful as you're navigating phrase strings. The Teams tab here, this is for grouping users and batch assigning access rights. So this becomes more useful the more users are working within a strings organization. All right. Let's talk next about the translation memory and term bases options here. So the way translation memory works within strings is that they're connected to other projects that are within your strings organization. So the translation memory in strings remembers translations used in your projects and then will suggest matching results while translating that content. And I'll show you what the suggestion options look like in the editor in a little bit. Term bases, however, you can think of it as a glossary of words, and this is obviously very useful for the translation process, as this ensures translators are using the correct designated terminology as part of the translation process. So I have a few terms here within my marketing term base. You can download and upload additional terms. You can also add terms directly within strings by clicking Add New Term. Okay. I'll show you how to enable a term base within a project as well. Again, a helpful link to our Help Center documentation. I'll go over our over-the-air and integration options or our features towards the end of the webinar. These are super cool. But let's go into some more housekeeping items. I'm going to click on my initials here at the top right, go to Settings and Profile. So under my profile, this is where I can set my profile picture. You can maintain and change your password. You can set your preferred language for the translation center. We have some options here. And set the time zone that you're located in. And you can also change the theme. So we have light mode and dark mode available. All right. Furthermore, under user settings, we have the open authorization, two-factor authentication options here that can be configured. Also, under the Access Tokens tab, you can manage authentication settings with other applications or generate new tokens. All right. And then under the Notifications tab, this is where you can select the events for which you want to receive notifications. So there's a few options here. You can also set what email frequency you want to receive notifications. You can also turn them off completely if you prefer not to receive notifications. All right. Again, a link to our Help Center documentation site here. Next, under Settings and Organization, this is where you can view your account details and plan and subscription details if you have the permission rights to see that. SSO can also be configured here. If you're already working with a language service provider, this is where you would set up that integration. And then under machine translation, this is where you can enable different machine translation engines or providers if that is part of your translation process. So when I get into project creation in just a moment here, you'll see how the linguists are prompted with translation memory and machine translation suggestions when they start the translation. Finally, under my initials here, under organizations, if you're collaborating or working with multiple strings accounts, you can easily toggle between them here under this icon. And then finally, over here on the bottom left, you do have access to our support center here by clicking on Help on the bottom left. You can also access our documentation site and also view our keyboard shortcuts. All right. Now that basic housekeeping is completed, I would like to show you how easy it is to create a project. So first things first, let's select New Project here at the top right. I'm going to give it a project name. I'm going to select the format, Android Studio, and then Android for my main technology. You can leave these blank. However, if you do insert the main format and technology, then strings will automatically pre-populate suggestions on file import settings, which is very useful. One thing to note, and I'll show in a moment as well, that you can download your translation in various file formats. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click Save and set up my languages. So I'm going to select English as my source. And let's do Spanish and French for my target languages. You can also add additional languages to the project later on. Again, note the link to our help.center documentation. I'll go ahead and click Create Languages. And now I'm going to manually upload a resource file that contains my key value pairs for translation. So I'm going to choose the file, select my strings XML. It's already pre-selecting here. I'm going to use an existing language that I've already created just now and click on Import. All right, so the upload is successful. I can go back to the overview. I can upload another file. So here, now strings will prompt you automatically to invite coworkers to the project, to open the strings in the editor, or to explore your dashboard. I'm going to skip the setup for now and show you this is now my project created. So over here, I have a nice overview of the translations required. Now it shows that I have 3 keys for translation. To create a new job, you can simply click Create New Job here. You can also add a new job here. You can navigate to your Jobs tab, here, and create a new job. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You give the job an actual name. You can set the default or keep the default, or you can set it a new project name or job name. Select the desired deadline that you'd like the translators to complete it by. Okay. You can enter any briefing or instructions. You can provide a URL if you're using a ticket management system such as Jira. And then here is where you would select all the keys for translation. So there can be several keys maintained within a project in strings, and then you can create as many jobs as you'd like within strings as well, or within the actual project, depending on your requirements and your current process. So I'm going to click Add Selection. I can remove keys from jobs, or I can add them back in. If you have hundreds of keys, then you would select them all. And then you'd select your languages, right? So I'm going to select my Spanish. And this is where I would invite, if I'm using strings as a standalone platform, this is where I would add my linguist user, my translator, to this job to work on the translation. And then hit continue. I can also save as a template. And then if everything looks good, I would go ahead and click Start Job. So once the job has been started, the translator will get notified that there's a new translation to work on within strings, and they would come into strings and open up the editor and work on the translation. Furthermore, if you're using the phrase suite, then they would work, the linguist may or may not work on the translation within phrase TMS. All right, so again, this was a manual way to get keys into strings for translation. Now I'm going to show you a localization workflow led from a developer's perspective by using our GitHub sync. And the GitHub sync is used to ingest keys into strings. So here I am. I just wanted to go back for a moment. I have my new project here that I've created, and under the languages tab here, you can see I've already enabled my GitHub sync integration into this project. So with the GitHub sync, it allows you to import resource files from GitHub, and then when the translation is completed, export back to GitHub as a pull request. All right. So at this point in this project, I have no keys associated. If I look under More and Keys, you'll see, okay, no keys created yet. Looking at my Git repo, you can see I have several resource files here that I want to ingest into strings for translation. I also have this phrase YAML configuration file, which must be present in the repository. So this file defines which files to import or export from the repository. So let's go back to my project and go ahead and import from GitHub. I have a notification here at the bottom that it successfully started. Quick refresh, and you can see now that it's ingested some keys here. So if I go into the actual editor, this is where I can view my keys for translation. So at this point, I can select the target languages I'd like to view. I'll select Spanish, and it'll present me with this bilingual view, right, for each key value pair. There's a few different options on how you'd like to view things in the editor. So this would be the linguist experience working within the editor, but also for developers, you can set things like character limitations directly within this editor view. So first things first, my view option up the top, I can change the card layout from vertical to horizontal split. I can change it to dark mode from here as well. And then here there's additional options to copy keys, delete keys, copy the project ID. Over here on the right-hand panel, this is what I was mentioning before. So depending on the key value pair, and you click into it, you're prompted with suggestions from either a connected project that would have the translation memory match, or it would also perhaps suggest a match from a machine translation engine. So for this one, it's giving me options for both, right? So here it's suggesting a match from Amazon Translate and also from a connected project in strings. Furthermore, I can add a screenshot for reference for the translators working on the translations. I can also add a Figma preview, which I'll show you in a moment. You can also from here add this key to a job. You can add tags. You can see the metadata associated with the specific key, including the translation ID and key ID. And you have your activity tab here. And you can also see the all languages previews here with all the languages for the specific key within this job. So, as I mentioned, I can make a comment for a colleague here directly within the editor. They would get notified to come take a look. At this point, they can reply to the comment. They can add an emoji. And then this leads to a more collaborative environment, so everybody's aware of what's happening within this actual project and job. So as I mentioned, you can set specific character limits directly, I'm going to hit OK, within a specific key itself. So here I'm in this, well, let me go to the app agreement here. And under these three dots here, I can set a character limitation. So it will give suggestions based on the language pair and the typical text expansion. And then also, if you want to set a character limitation for all the keys and not necessarily one key, you can do so by clicking here at the top, where you would select all your keys, the top left here. Navigate down here to, again, these three dots and set a character limit. And this character limit will be set for all languages. So in the case that you do set a character limitation for a certain set of keys or individual keys, and the linguist exceeds that character limitation, they will be flagged to check that and then revise the translation accordingly. Also under this view, you can see there's different options here. So not only can you add screenshots, add these keys to a job, you can do it over here on this side up top. So there's several different options for performing actions within strings. Okay, so now that I've adjusted these keys into strings, I want to take a look at my Figma design. So here we go. This is my Cat Cafe design. Let me just move the screen over here a little bit. And you can see the design has the exact same values that I pulled in from my GitHub repository. And I've labeled the text layers in Figma, in this Figma design, exactly the same as the key names that came from GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these and run my Figma plugin, or my phrase strings plugin that I've already installed. So here on the left, I'm going to plugin and phrase strings. Okay, so you can see it's identified all these keys. They've not yet been connected to phrase strings. So I'm going to hit continue, and I'm going to select that same project that I've just ingested keys from my GitHub repo. I'm going to pull in the English. All right, and I do want to upload screenshots. I want to send those over to phrase strings for reference for the linguist. So now I'm going to push to phrase strings. And it's identifying that there's key names already exist in the selected project. So yes, I do want to connect with the existing keys and hit accept and proceed. It takes just a moment. Okay, great. So now let me navigate back to the editor in strings. And I'm going to click refresh. So again, to reiterate, I push those key value pairs from my Figma design to the same project. And you can see now it's pulled in references, right? So now I have that Figma design preview. So depending on what key I select here, if I click into the actual key and the Figma preview, you can see it brings me directly to that screen, or exactly directly to that string. Okay, so again, here's that preview. So once the translation process has been completed, it's either translated directly within strings or phrase TMS, I can go ahead now and go navigate back to Figma, and within my phrase plugin, I can pull the translations now into Figma. So now you can see the status shows that all these keys have been connected, right? And I want to pull now the French into my Figma design. You can see now the keys are translated. I'm going to hit continue. And yes, I do want to create a new page with the translated content. You do have the choice, however, to override text layers. I'm going to pull to Figma. And you can see now that it's created a separate page over here with the French. And now, as a designer, you can go ahead and adjust the design accordingly. Furthermore, as a developer, I can go back now to the same project in strings, under languages, and GitHub sync. I can now export to GitHub as a pull request. So that will pull back those translated resource files to my Git repository. All right, so it says my locales we've exported in just a few moments. Navigating back, I'm just going to hit refresh and navigate to my phrase translations branch. And here you can see that those resource files with the translations are now back in my Git repository. Great. Another thing to mention is that you can download the translations in several different file formats. So say you uploaded an XML file, once the translation is completed, you can actually download it in any of these different formats. So it's very versatile within that realm. All right. So now that I've gone over a round trip to manually upload a file with keys for translation to strings and also to use integrations such as GitHub and Figma, I want to look into the actual project details, a little more housekeeping, so to speak. So in a project, I have my overview here, which gives you, your basic information about your project. Languages is obviously where you have your pre-existing languages. You can also add additional languages at any time to a project. Under the Branches tab here, when enabled, it will allow teams to work on parallel versions of the project at the same time while retaining an unedited copy, right? So this eliminates the risk of accidentally overwriting others' changes to project's files. Under Jobs, this is where you would view all your jobs. You can create new jobs. You can look at project templates or create a new project template, so that way everything's already pre-populated every time you create a job, and you don't have to reinsert all the information over and over again. Quality assurance. So in a case of a violation, such as character limits, limitation being exceeded, notifications are immediately displayed in this dashboard or in this tab, and it will list all the QA issues which have been found for the current project. So linguists will be notified to go back into the editor and correct these violations. Under analytics here, this is where you can find statistics for projects, languages, and then also user activity. Under the Activity tab, you have a trail and timeline of what has occurred in the project, and there are some filter options here as well, by user, by date, so you can see everything I've just completed within the project. Okay. Under Orders, this is where you have the option to order professional translations from Phrase translation partners if you do not already have an in-house translation team or a translation provider. Under the More tab here, you can upload additional files, resource files, or documents. You have access to your keys. You can add additional keys directly here. If you don't want to upload a resource file, you can actually create them in strings directly. You can edit existing keys. You can add tags, right? So with the tags can be attached to keys with meaningful labels that always keep them well organized. So they're useful to track which keys belong to a certain feature or section of a project, for example, which will help the translation process happen more efficiently. You can also add screenshots, create style guides. You can look at the keys that may or not have been blocked from your project. However, under More and Project Settings, this is really the meat of the project. So here you have some general information about the project, right? Under Placeholders here, this is where you can select all required format styles, and the linguist will see all matching placeholders highlighted within the editor if you have some of these enabled, right? You can upload a project image. I added my cat cafe image here to this specific project. Under plural forms, just to note, the translation of plural sensitive strings are supported, so that's an option here. And you can click here to learn more. Under advanced, this is where you would enable branching as well, enable any machine translation or autocomplete options. You can also enable ICU message format support. You can learn more by clicking here on our documentation site. Under our review workflow, you can set a key status if you'd like. Again, click here to learn more. Term bases, this is where you can select a term base to be associated with a certain project. So it would flag any terminology to the linguist or in the editor as part of the translation. In Context Editor, which is a new feature, I'm going to show that in just a couple minutes. GitHub Sync, so this is what I just demonstrated. This is where I set up my GitHub Sync. I've added my personal access token from my GitHub repository, selected where I want to pull those resource files from and which branch. We also have auto import options as well for the GitHub Sync. This is where you get the project ID for API purposes. under pre-translation here, this is where you can let phrase translate new content automatically using translation memory and machine translation. So if you want keys to be translated automatically, so you can have a preview, that you can do that here. All right, and then finally under variables, these can be created and used to store configuration flags and similar data for workflows, integrations, or scripts, right, directly within your phrase project. You can learn more by clicking here. Okay, so let's look at integrations. So under the integrations tab here, my menu bar on the bottom left, let's look at Job Sync first. So Job Sync is where you are working with the entire phrase suite, also including phrase TMS, the translation management system. So phrase strings and phrase TMS work together very nicely. So if you're a developer working in phrase strings, as soon as you create a job, they can be sent over phrase TMS for translation. And that's where you have access to additional resources such as language AI, machine translation aggregators, additional AI capabilities. So you can take a look at the Phrase TMS webinar that my colleague Giorgio just gave earlier this week. It'll be available on our website. API. So the API, obviously, you can build your own integrations using our API. So you can allow you to import files, download files, tag keys, and interact in other ways with localization data stored in phrase strings, especially if you have certain security requirements. A lot of our customers also do use command line interface as a means of interacting with phrase strings. Okay. We do have an OpenAI integration option which can be added, and that works similar to a machine translation engine as part of the translation process. So you can see additional options here. Went over Figma, GitHub Sync. We also have GitLab, Bitbucket, and additional options. So what I want to get into next is the over-the-air option. So with over-the-air, you can update translations for iOS, Android, React Native, and Flutter applications instantly without having to release a new version to the Apple Store or Google Play Store each time there's a change to the translation, right? So let's take a look at my over-the-air distribution for Android Studio. Okay. So let me just bring up my Android Studio emulator. You can see here, this is mimicking an Android phone. I have a simple app here with the translation for Hello World in Spanish, Hola Mundo. Within strings, I have the option to deploy requests to development or to production releases. So let me show you what this looks like. So I have this Android Studio distribution added, and I have it connected to an actual project within strings that contains those key value pairs that are part of my app. So navigating to languages, I'm going to go into my editor, and I'm going to select on Spanish. So here's that hello world that you just saw, right, in my emulator here, and I want to make a change to the English and the Spanish. So I just changed the English, added an additional exclamation point, and now the Spanish, you can see it's prompting that Amazon Translate, and my translation memory from a different project is linking that, and it's giving me this option. So I'm going to select this one, and it's giving me updated exclamation points as well. Hit save. Now I'm going to navigate back to my over-the-air, back to my Android Studio distribution. So I'm going to add a new release. Okay, looks good, and I'm going to save that. It's bringing me to my distribution information. Here's my release. Quick refresh. Okay, so now I'll hit publish, and it will release this to production and make it available to all the users within the specified app version range. So I'm going to hit publish and navigate back to my Android Studio emulator. Okay, now if I hit the app, there's the change with the additional exclamation points. All right, finally, I do want to go over our in-context editor. So strings can integrate with our in-context editor, allowing for translation and QA within a web framework in real time. So here is my actual demo page, and you can see I have these pencil icons enabled to be able to edit the translation directly within my web framework, right? So underneath here, you can see I have the same strings editor experience. As a linguist, I can come in and make changes to the strings, and I can see what it looks like in real time on the actual page. All right, so this really is designed to help translators get more things done efficiently and translate an entire web page through the direct integration with Strings Translation Editor. Okay, back to strings. I think I've covered all of the main topics for today, and we're about at the half an hour point, so I think we're ready for questions. Kate, back over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Alicia. That was awesome. I'm looking in the Slido here. I'm not seeing any questions yet. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead, drop them in the Slido. I'll share the link one more time. But yeah, just to get the conversation going, Alicia, can you tell us a little bit more about over the air and what that looks like? I know you just showed us how it can be used for software development in an Android context, but does that apply to like any type of software that you'd be developing?
Yeah, so in our latest release in September, we now offer over the air for web. So that is a new release I'm looking forward to, or one of my colleagues is looking forward to demoing it in the next series of webinars. So that's exciting, and there's more information available on our help documentation site as well.
Perfect. That's awesome. Okay, cool. While we wait for questions and see about that, I'm just going to share this information about some other webinars just to spark your interest. If you have, Alicia did mention that Giorgio had just done a intro to phrase TMS, but I'm going to show you a little bit more info about what that looks like. So we did have a webinar on Monday about intro to phrase TMS for linguists, and then we had one on Tuesday about phrase TMS for project managers. So the recordings for both of those will be available on our website and on our YouTube page very soon. So keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to let us know. And yeah, no questions in Slido. So thank you all so much for joining. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day or a great rest of your evening, depending on where you are in the world. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining.